Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC 174, Johnson versus Bagautinov. I think this is a pretty low talent level card. Um, Really surprising to me that the UFC is putting on a pay per view with flyweights headlining. I don't think there's any way that this card is going to sell well, and I'm not a guy who dislikes the flyweights just because of their size. That's not my problem with this card. My problem is that I don't think Bagautinov is really going to be a great challenger for Johnson. I don't think the fight is going to be that competitive and just not that interesting of a fight to me. And below the co-main event, these fights are just not pay-per-view caliber. And then the prelim card is even worse. A lot of newcomers, guys that should be on the prelim card of a prelim portion of a fight pass card. Really not a lot to look forward to here, but let's get into the predictions. So starting off with the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card at lightweight, Jason Sago versus Josh Shockley. I'm going to have to completely skip this one. Never heard of either of these guys. I don't know who they are. Next up at bantamweight, also on the Fight Pass preliminary card, Roland Delorme is taking on Michinori Tanaka. And never heard of Tanaka. He's undefeated, 9-0. I don't see anyone on his record that I know. Delorme, on the other hand, vet of tough 14, and he's had several fights under his belt at this point. A bit inconsistent, kind of up and down. Real brawler, really scrappy guy. He had a nice win over Josh Ferguson his first fight. Knocked him down with a jab and choked him out. Had a real back and forth brawl with Nick Denis. Also won that by rear naked choke. Then got knocked out by Rivera in the first round. Had nothing for him. Won a really close back and forth decision over Edwin Figueroa. A lot of people thought he lost that. And then his last fight, he couldn't strike with Caceres. Was not that dominant of a win for Caceres. Delorme had a moment early where he took him down and quickly moved into a crucifix position, dropped some elbows, but could not compete with Caceres on the feet. I think Delorme, with the fights he's had in the UFC so far, I think that experience should be enough to take him over Tanaka. Again, a really scrappy guy. Has some good technique. Again, that jab, he knocked a step-in jab that he knocked down Ferguson with. I remember that. Pretty impressive. And some submission ability. So I'm going to take Delorme. Again, that's not knowing anything about Tanaka, but I think Delorme's a safe pick considering his UFC experience. Moving on to the FX preliminary card, a lightweight, Cajun Johnson taking on Tai Hyun Bang. Tai Hyun Bang, he lost to, I believe it was Mairbek Taisumov on the Singapore card. Let me confirm that quickly. But that was a pretty forgettable fight. I just remember Taisumov controlling that fight in every area, kickboxing, and I believe he took him down, but not sure about that. Give me a second here. Sorry. I think Bang was trying to get it to the ground, if I remember, in that fight, but really wasn't competitive at all against Taisumov. And again, a pretty forgettable fight. Not one I care to go back and analyze. Yeah, it was Mairbek Taisumov that he lost to. And Cajun Johnson, coming off of the Tough Nations show. His first fight in the house was a really quick submission win that he won by heel hook, I believe it was. He came out red hot in that fight, went right after it, really aggressive, attacking with submissions, and I was really impressed, actually. At that point, even though it was the first fight, I picked him to win the show. I just thought he looked great, and then got brutally knocked out by the eventual winner, Chad Laprise. So 2 very different performances for him on the show. But I am going to take Cajun Johnson here. He's 19-10. Bang is 16-8. Not any guys here on his record that really jump out or that I'm even familiar with. But again, I'm going to take Johnson just based on that first fight he had in the Tough Nations house. Really liked that performance, that submission win by him. And Bang, I thought, looked pretty bad against against Taisumov, who later lost to Prazeres and wasn't quite the hyped prospect after that loss everyone thought he was. So I don't know. Seems like two low-level guys with about the same level of experience, but I'll go with Cajun Johnson. Next up at bantamweight, Yves Jabouin. Yves the Tiger Jabouin taking on Mike the Hulk Easton. This is one of the fights that I'm looking forward to more on the card. Pretty good matchup. And Mike Easton, I think, is the big favorite in this fight, but I don't see it. I'm taking Yves Jabouin. Mike Easton, his only win of any merit in the UFC really was against Ivan Menjivar, where I thought that was the fight he looked the best in. His boxing looked good. He really shut down Menjivar's striking game. And before that had wins over Scrubs, Byron Bloodworth, and Jared Papazian. Since then, on a 3-fight losing streak, all to really good guys. Rafael Assunção, Brad Pickett, and Dillashaw. But in that Assunção fight and in that Dillashaw fight, was really stuck. Could not figure out the striking game of either of those guys, Assunção and Dillashaw. Assunção, that fight was pretty uneventful, but Assunção was able to control the distance. Easton couldn't get on the inside. Really seemed he had no answer on the feet for Assunção. And then Dillashaw just showed he was a far better striker and really put it on Easton. And I think he's going to have a tough time figuring out the striking of Jabouin here. Jabouin's a vet. In that Eddie Wineland fight, even though he lost to him, I think he won the first round. He was able to land some good strikes and head kicks on Wineland. He's been knocked out by Brad Pickett. Lost to Pablo Garza by submission in his first fight in the UFC. But has had some wins also. While Watson, Jeff Hoagland, who he really put a beating on, and Yves Jabouin has this really wild and orthodox striking game. Throws a lot of kicks, spinning kicks, a lot of stuff like that. Very active on the feet, really goes after his opponent. Had a decent win over Dustin Page. So not a guy that's really had... doesn't really have wins over a lot of upper-level competition in the UFC. But I think he can get it done against Easton. I don't know about the wrestling though. Easton may be able to take him down and hold him there, but I really think that Jabouin's unorthodox, wild, aggressive striking is going to be enough to really fluster Easton and win a decision. I do think it'll be a close competitive fight though. And moving on, another fight I'm going to have to skip. Women's bantamweight division. Valerie Letourneau taking on Elizabeth Phillips. Again, don't know anything about either of these ladies. And another fight that affirms in my mind that this is a really bad card. And the final fight on the prelim card, welterweight Daniel Sarafian taking on Kiichi Kunimoto. Kiichi Kunimoto coming off of his DQ win over Luis Dutra, where he was hit in the back of the head. I think it was an elbow to the back of the head, and then he fired off several more, and they called the fight there. He won the DQ. Nothing happened in that fight before that point, and Kunimoto, I think he's one of these guys that the UFC just brought in to fill one of their cards. I believe that was the Singapore card. Let me check that. Kunimoto, 16-5, and yes, that was the Singapore card. So I think that means something, with the international expansion. The UFC is just bringing in a lot of low-level guys you've never heard of, and him being on that card, I think that means something. But anyway, he didn't do anything in that fight up to that point. And Sarafian, despite his recent setback to Cesar Ferreira and also losing to CB Dalloway, his only win in the UFC, coming against Eddie Mendez, who's also a guy who nobody has ever heard of. He impressed me on the show Tough Brazil 1. He knocked out Sergio Moraes with a flying knee in the house, and can't remember who his other win was over, but he looked solid on the show. Looked fairly athletic, with some good power, and showed some submission skills against Eddie Mendez. This is his first fight at welterweight against Cesar Ferreira. He was way more aggressive on the feet and actually beating Ferreira there, but Ferreira was just able to take him down at will and beat on him from top position. It's way too small for middleweight. Against CB Dalloway, he showed some very powerful in close striking in that fight. He was able to close the distance early on and really land some bombs on Dalloway. Had him hurt early, but faded as the fight went on. And Dalloway actually dropped him in the third round of that fight, if I remember correctly. But Sarafian, again, the Tough Brazil experience, a couple of fights in the UFC. I think he's going to have no problem with Kunimoto. And again, I only saw Kunimoto's last fight against Dutra, but I think Sarafian will handle him fine. I think he should run through him. I'm going to take Sarafian by first round knockout. He's a pretty aggressive guy and shown good power before. And moving on to the main card at light heavyweight, Ryan Jimmo taking on Ovince St. Preux. Not a pay-per-view level fight at all. I don't think anybody paying for this pay-per-view feels that they really want to see this. This is definitely a prelim level fight, and I don't really know why they're trying to push St. Preux. He was on this same slot on the pay-per-view card on 171, the opening fight for the main card. he should have been on the prelim card, and Gastelum, the Gastelum Rick Story fight should have been in his spot as the opening pay-per-view fight. But anyway, Ryan Jimmo, kind of inconsistent. His last couple of fights have been win-loss, win-loss. He's shown some power in his first fight, destroying Anthony Preux, and then in his most recent fight, knocking out Sean O'Connell in the first round. Also nearly knocked out James Tahuna, but Tahuna came back and was actually able to hurt Jimmo later on and controlled him with the wrestling. Had a really just boring fight against Igor Pokrayets, just a clinch fest and lay and pray. And then had a injury loss against Jimmy Manuwa where it just looked like he was just hopping up and down at one point and just dropped to the canvas, hurt his ankle, I believe. But Ovince St. Preux, I think he will be more athletic. I think he'll be able to use the wrestling. Jimmo does have that power, but St. Preux hasn't looked too bad. He has a nice little 4-fight win streak, but 3-fight win streak since coming to the UFC. The John Vellante fight, though he won after poking Vellante in the eye. That was in the third round, and he was winning the rounds before that, although that was a pretty uneventful fight. Knocked out Cody Donovan, showed big power. Cody Donovan actually had him pressed up against the fence, and I don't remember if Donovan tried to take him down or St. Preux just did a foot trip, landed on top, and immediately put him out with a couple of big ground and pound shots. And then submitted Nikita Krylov with a Von Flue choke, which was great to see, but Krylov a really low-level opponent. So Ryan Jimmo, I think, is going to be a decent test for both guys. Both guys have good experience. St. Preux is 15-5. Jimmo's 19-3, so similar experience. I give Jimmo the power advantage on the feet, but I think we're going to see St. Preux's wrestling and ground game here, and from top, I think it's going to be too big, too strong, too powerful. So I'm taking Ovince St. Preux in this fight. Moving on. At heavyweight, the return of Andre the Pitbull Arlovski taking on Brendan Schaub. Brendan the Hybrid Schaub. I don't understand why Arlovski in 2014 is fighting in the UFC. It's 35, and it's 2014. I mean, this is the guy that they used to show a bunch of his fights on what's it called? The Spike TV reruns. From way back in the day. I mean, when was this guy last champion in the UFC? 2005, 2006. 2006, nearly 10 years ago. He's on a 2-fight win streak. Mike Kyle and a guy who I've never heard of, Andreas Kroniatakis. Lost to Anthony Johnson in a decision. Knocked out Devin Cole. I mean, who's his biggest win there? Mike Kyle. Everyone's beaten that guy. I don't think he can beat Brendan Schaub. Both guys have glass jaws, but Arlovski did take Anthony Johnson to a decision, so Johnson couldn't knock him out. I'm not gonna take Schaub to knock him out, but I do think Schaub will control the striking for most of the fight. Arlovski could always catch Schaub. Schaub has a glass chin of his own, but I think he really turned a corner in his last fight, where he won in a way he never had before with the Darce choke over Mitrione. I just gotta go with Schaub. Younger guy, not as many miles, hasn't taken as much punishment as Arlovski. Yeah, not much to say about this fight. I'm taking Brendan Schaub. I think he realized, he doesn't have the chin to be headhunting and always desperately looking for the knockout. He's going to use his wrestling here just like he did against Mitrione and LeVar Johnson before that. Take Arlovski down, and even if it stays on the feet, if Schaub doesn't get reckless there, I think he can be technical enough and pick his shots well enough, pick his opportunities to come forward with a barrage like he did against Mitrione, and I think he should win a decision here. Next up, at light heavyweight, Ryan Bader taking on Rafael Feijão Cavalcante. This fight is the most intriguing to me on the whole card. Ryan Bader, a guy the UFC has given several opportunities against top contenders to prove himself and really get himself over that hump and into title contention, has never done it though. Was looking good against Teixeira early, ended up getting knocked out. Really had absolutely nothing for Machida, just try to bum rush him, when nothing was happening in the first round of their fight. Well, it was the second round, and Machida just crushed him, knocked him out. And then in between these fights, the UFC has thrown really low-level guys at him. Jason Brills, Matt Yushchenko, not such a low-level guy, but still at his age, and then Anthony Preux in his last fight. So, and he did have the win over Rampage, not terribly impressive. Got it done with the wrestling, but his last fight against Anthony Preux, he was just dominating, crushing this guy. Preux had nothing for him. He was on his knees most of the fight, couldn't get back up to his feet, and Bader could not put him away. I thought that was pretty telling of where Bader is at. Again, he looked good early against Glover Teixeira, really aggressive. Actually seemed to hurt Teixeira early on the feet there. He has a really good front headlock position, guillotine that he used over Matt Yushchenko and attempted over Teixeira. He comes on real strong early. Same thing with Cavalcante. And I think Cavalcante is a real important test for Bader. Again, they've thrown these just low-level guys at him in between his contender fights, and he's kind of run through them. And Cavalcante, not one of these guys who's come over from Strikeforce like Rockhold or Jacare that's just set the world on fire, but a guy who is talented and dangerous. Was the Strikeforce light heavyweight champion. Finished King Mo, lost to Dan Henderson. Finished Yoel Romero, which I didn't even know until watching this right now. Also had a submission win over Mike Kyle. And then coming into the UFC, has only had 2 fights. Was looking good against Silva really early, and then just seemed to gas or shut down, and Silva was able to knock him out. And his next fight against Igor Pokrajac really showed he was on a totally different level than Pokrajac. Got him out of there early. I believe he was in the clinch, had Pokrajac up against the fence, and was able to finish him with some knees and strikes. So Cavalcante is a skilled, dangerous guy with both submissions and striking, and Bader hasn't faced a guy like that who isn't an immediate number one contender like Machida or Teixeira. So this is really, I think, the final test for Bader. If he can't get past Cavalcante, I don't see him ever, moving past a gatekeeper role that he has right now. But I think Bader's wrestling, could give Cavalcante trouble. Looking at his record, I didn't see the Yoel Romero fight, so I don't know how his wrestling was there. I didn't see the King Mo fight, but he did beat him. So not a whole lot of wrestlers that he's faced. I think that's a big question mark if Bader can, get him down. I mean, I think he can, but against Anthony Preux, Bader didn't really use his wrestling all that dominantly. And Bader's never really been a guy to just hold people down and, really use his wrestling to win fights. He's really kind of focused on the striking aspect of his game. So if he chooses to wrestle with Cavalcante, I think, he might be able to expose him there. I don't know how good Cavalcante will be off his back, but on the feet, I think this is really interesting. Bader comes out with those big power shots, kind of reckless. He threw those bombs against Teixeira and ended up getting caught. So I think Cavalcante has a chance to catch him early there. I mean, Bader could hurt him too, but I feel that Bader's more kind of he throws bombs, and Cavalcante's he's got more technique to his striking. But interesting fight, and I want to take Cavalcante. I think early, he'll be real dangerous. As the fight goes on, if it gets out of the first round and into the second and third, I think Bader will have the better cardio there. I think he might be able to use his wrestling there more. Fei Zhao kind of strikes me as a guy who isn't very well conditioned, not at the top level of UFC athletes. I can't get that video out of my mind when he was slap boxing with Steven Seagal before UFC 148, before Anderson Silva's fight with Chael Sonnen, and he just looked really out of shape there. So, and maybe that's part of why he lost to Silva in that fight. But I don't know. It's a tough one for me to pick. I don't think Bader's used to fighting these kind of in-between guys. These guys, clearly above the lowest ranks of the division, but not quite there at immediate contender status. I think Cavalcante gets it done with the striking. I think he hurts Bader on the feet. Bader's been put out a few times now by Teixeira and Machida. His chin probably be diminished by that, and I'm going to take Cavalcante, but I think it's going to be a competitive fight and a real tough one to call. And on to the co-main event, Rory Aries McDonald taking on Tyron Woodley. Really important fight. I'm going to take Woodley to win the fight. I feel pretty comfortable with that pick. McDonald, to me, has not been the same guy since he beat BJ Penn. I think facing a higher level of competition, Jake Ellenberger, Lawler, and then Damian Maia, he hasn't been able to put in the same kind of performances he did against, the Mike Pyle and Che Mills, those kind of guys. McDonald used to be a super dynamic guy, incorporated judo in his game. If you go back and watch some of his old fights, he used a lot of foot sweeps and leg trips. Put on a great wrestling display against Nate Diaz. Real heavy ground and pound that he put out Che Mills and Mike Pyle with. A really aggressive guy, and has just totally changed his game to being a really conservative, cautious, laid-back fighter. Really saw that against Ellenberger. And then he lost to Lawler. And Maia, I thought he looked real bad early on in that fight, getting taken down and almost pounded out by Maia. Really got beat up in that first round. And then the rest of the fight, Maia was gassed, and he was more aggressive there than he was against Ellenberger, but it was still just, jab cross, very basic striking, totally different than the display of striking he put on BJ Penn. I thought was pretty disappointing, but Lawler really solved the McDonald puzzle, and it really just clicked, I think, in Lawler's mind in that fight. If you just go forward and pressure this guy with big, heavy punches, just walk him down, he's just going to get overwhelmed. And you saw in that third round, McDonald did win that second round, was able to take down Lawler. But in that third round, Lawler just came forward, the reckless abandon, just threw wild punches, had no respect for McDonald's jab or anything, and was able to knock down McDonald, almost finished him, and he hurt him. And Woodley, I think, is even more explosive than Lawler, especially in that first round. Comes forward very aggressively. And Damian Maia took this guy down. Woodley, is a real wrestler. I think he's got way better wrestling than Maia. I think he can take McDonald down too. And I'm taking Woodley to win this fight. I think he's way too aggressive, too powerful for McDonald on the feet, especially in that first round. I mean, the way he put out Koscheck, and even that Carlos Condit fight, which ended in a really bad way, kind of getting injured, but he still came forward early in that fight and landed some huge overhands on Condit. I think he can do that to McDonald and just come forward with that pressure. I think he's going to overwhelm McDonald, and McDonald fighting in the cautious manner he has been lately. I don't think that's going to work at all against Woodley. Woodley's only setback in the UFC was that bizarre loss to Jake Shields, which Jake Shields really didn't do anything to him, and Jake Shields always has those really bizarre fights. But Woodley, again, looked great against Koscheck. Just blitzed Huron in that opening round. Also lost to Marquardt, but I think he's improved greatly since then. And everyone's saying this guy fades in the third round. I didn't see many of his Strikeforce fights, and maybe I just didn't see that if that's the case. But I never saw him fade, and I think he's really going to put it on McDonald in that first round, possibly finish him there. If he finishes him, I definitely think it'll be early on in the first round. I don't think he can, finish him late, but I feel really comfortable taking Woodley here. An important fight for him too, to prove that he really is the number one contender. A dominant win over Condit, definitely would have done that for him. But the way that fight ended with an injury, just left a question mark. Would Condit have been able to come back in that fight? And this fight here, I think he really needs a dominant performance to solidify himself as a contender. And the main event for the flyweight title, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson taking on Ali Bagautinov. Like I said at the beginning, I don't see this as particularly competitive. Demetrius Johnson, I think, is incredible. especially that last knockout over Joseph Benavidez. I mean, who saw that coming? Just a one-punch knockout, clean, put him out. And against a real dangerous striker like Benavidez, I mean, you saw nothing like that in their first fight, and which went all 5 rounds, and then he just one shot KOs him. Really impressive. John Moraga put on a wrestling clinic, and finished him late in the 5th round with the armbar. His toughest fight was Dodson, and I think Dodson is still the only guy who could potentially be a real challenge for Mighty Mouse and potentially beat him. But Mighty Mouse, like we saw in that Dodson fight and also in the Moraga fight, he gets stronger as the fight goes on, and he is dangerous late. Like we saw in the Moraga fight. Also in that Benavidez fight, I thought one of his most dominant rounds was that 5th round, extremely well conditioned, fights at a very high pace, and just gets in your face, goes to work early. I think he's going to be way too fast and speedy for Bagautinov, both on the feet and with the wrestling. And I think any talk that Bagautinov is a better wrestler than Johnson, I think is just ridiculous. Johnson, his whole game is wrestling, and it's always been that way. The only time he was ever out wrestled was that first fight with Ian McCall, and that was his first fight at flyweight. I think that had to do with the weight cut. In their rematch, Ian McCall wasn't able to take him down at all. Showed none of that wrestling that he did in the first fight. I remember when he first came into the UFC, coming over from the WEC, his takedown against Yamamoto showed he has a very quick shot, very quick entry, just has great speed. He also used that wrestling against Damasio Page, and the WEC was able to submit him. Same thing, took Miguel Torres down. He's a great wrestler, and then his striking really seems to have come a long way, and adding submission ability, he's just a really complete, great fighter. And I don't know, TJ Dillashaw, after his win over Renan Barao, I guess you can't really ever count anyone out, but going in that fight, I didn't give Dillashaw much of a chance, and that's how I feel about Bagautinov here. His knockout in his first fight in the UFC came against a guy who was was just a washout from Tough Brazil 1, Marcos Vinicius, and who's on a 4-fight losing streak, by the way, just pulled up his record. But Bagautinov looked good against Tim Elliott. Really used counter-striking in that fight, was able to keep Elliott off of him, and Elliott wasn't able to take him down. And then against John Lineker, didn't engage in the striking much and used his wrestling, showed some decent ground and pound there. But Johnson's wrestling, I think, is just going to be way better. He's going to be way more technical. Johnson's just a very efficient fighter. Great movement. He seems to get dropped in all of his fights, but doesn't at one point or another. I think Moraga dropped him at one point. Dodson dropped him a few times. Benavidez dropped him in their first fight. But it doesn't matter in the end. He always comes back immediately when he gets hurt, and I just think we're going to see another typical Mighty Mouse performance, just really on point with the wrestling, taking Bagautinov down all day. I think Bagautinov too tough to be finished. It could happen, especially with that newfound knockout power he has. I'm really interested to see if he can repeat that in this fight. But I think it's going to be Mighty Mouse getting it done with his wrestling for 5 rounds. So, yeah, I'm taking Mighty Mouse. So those are my predictions for UFC 174, Johnson versus Bagautinov. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Please like the video. Comment with any of your thoughts. I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe. And I'll be back with my recap for this, and I'll be back with predictions for the next doubleheader, the Australia or the New Zealand fight night card, and the San Antonio fight night card. All right, guys, thanks. See you later. Bye.